This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so hey everyone. I'll introduce myself in a minute, but I'm Gervais J. J's my nickname. Gervais if you're French, Johnson. I'm going to record this, so just let everyone know. Record it. We have a YouTube channel, and we upload this. Over the last several years, we have a bunch of videos out there from people. So I'm going to test something here. Let me know if you can see my presentation here. Let me bring it up. All right, and let me put it in. Can you see it?
Not yet. We saw it earlier when you were sharing.
Yeah, so it stopped sharing, I think is what happened. All right. Let me do something interesting here. Share, okay. Pull this up here, pull this. Okay, I'll do that. All right, let me pull this down here. Let me put this. Testing some stuff out here on my computers and my screens. So, can you see it now?
No, not yet.
Okay, bear with me. Interesting. Why is this not working? Okay, entire screen and share. Anything yet? How weird.
Eagerly awaiting.
All right, so let me see why is this not working? Cool. I got that. All right, share. Pull this back up here. Okay, I'm gonna try something else here. How about now? Anything?
Not yet.
No, I can tell. No, I can tell it's not sharing. All right, this is very interesting. Anything now?
Not yet.
Jeez. Well, you know, I've used Zoom for many years, so I don't know what I'm doing wrong. This is like crazy, stupid, don't make no sense.
Have you tried turning it off and on?
Yeah, maybe I have to get out, come back in. So once I do that, I don't know what's going to happen, because since I'm the owner of this and I started it, it may end it for everyone, right? So
what you may be able to do is leave the room, and you can designate one of us as a host, and then when you come back, we should be able to pass it back to you.
Okay, so make GoPaul. I'm gonna make GoPaul the co-host. Okay. All right. This is bizarre. All right. So I'm gonna end and I'm gonna come back. If I lose it, everyone just stay put. Okay.
For those of you who joined, sorry, we're encountering some technical difficulties in sharing. Jay will be back shortly. Give us a minute.
All right, I'm back here. Also, bear with me here. doesn't look like it's still not working correctly. Because I know what it looks like when it shares the screen, when it works. It's saying it's sharing the screen. It says it is. Yeah, I don't see that it's working. Because y'all can't see my screen, right?
We cannot.
Wow.
How big is the presentation, Jay?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. See if that
No,
works.
no, no. How big is it? It depends on how big it is.
Yeah, let me look. It's like 13 meg.
Oh, wow. If you convert it into a PDF, will it become smaller?
Nah, they generally doesn't get much smaller when you convert it. It
Try
was
to send it
working.
to me. Usually that takes, there is a 10 meg cutoff, but just send it to me.
Okay. Wow, that's bizarre. Okay. Bear with me, y'all. If not, I can talk. That's for sure.
It's going to take a while
Mm-hmm.
to get to me.
The crazy part is that we could see it before.
Yeah, I know. So there's something goofy going on here. So just Barry, I don't think I can send it to you because it's not going to go. It's too big. Oh, hold on a second. Oh, I see the problem here.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I'm going to get out and come back in. Hold on a minute. Wow. Huh.
Hey, Jay, are you back? I don't think he's back. You guys can hear me, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh,
You
sorry,
should
we
be.
are having this trouble. There he is. Hey, Jay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful.
All right. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
We
All
have
right.
liftoff.
All right, cool. It was user error. For some reason, I had my video off and it wouldn't let me change it and put it back on. So I knew there was a problem. Okay, so welcome everyone.
Hey,
My name
Jay,
is-
since
Mhm.
the past 5 minutes has been wasted recording, do you want to stop and start the recording again?
No, it's still recording, right? Let me look.
Yeah, but you'll have to cut out all the things.
Yeah, I can edit that. But yeah,
Okay.
maybe that's better. Let's stop it. Boom. All right, good.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. So let me go back to the presentation. Cool. So hello, everyone. My name is Gervais or Gervais Johnson. My nickname is Jay. So I'm kind of co-creator of this meetup. We started this several years ago in San Francisco Bay Area when I lived there. Now I live in Carmel or Indianapolis area, and I work for a company called Eli Lilly. So just to let you know that I've been in the technology business for 40 years. I was in IBM for 20 years, and I've helped many, many companies do this lean agile transformation thing and work with many different industries over the 20 years. An early adopter, and I was a software engineer for many years. Early adopter of XP, and now what's DevSecOps and lean and agile and helping companies change and moving into an enterprise, an agile enterprise. And that's kind of what we do at this meetup. So our focus on the meetup is to talk about enterprise agile and large companies and change and companies that have been around for a while. You know, it's difficult. You know, change is just difficult, no matter what you're changing from to. So we kind of focus on that. We've had a lot of very interesting speakers come over the last several years. We record the videos and we upload them to our YouTube site, and then we continuously send out the link to everyone using the meetup communication and emails. And so we've developed this community over the years. And we've had, like I said, some interesting topics and discussions. So what I'm doing, this is our last kind of session this year. I thought, you know, I would have a conversation on neurodiversity. So I've provided this kind of speak to several people and conferences and so forth. And so I thought, you know, why don't we have a conversation about this? Because what the Scrum Guide says, what we know as Agile and how we encourage people to speak up and be engaged and participate does not necessarily work for neurodiverse people on your team or team of teams. So I'd like to talk about this. And I like having open conversations and interaction. So stop me at any time. I'm going to have plenty of time at the end of this presentation so we can have conversations and we can share our experience. I'm going to ask everyone to put themselves on mute until you ask a question. If you want to ask a question, just unmute and ask, because I hear some noises in the background. And then I think Gopal made you co-host, so you can mute people. So let's talk about this whole thing. And I want a special recognition to Darren Rowan. He's a part of Lilly, and he helped develop some of the slides you're about to see. And like many companies now, I think I've worked for many companies, and the company I work for now, I think, has one of the best diversity, equality, and inclusion program, DEI, that I've ever seen. And Darren's part of that program, and we talk about diversity and inclusion a lot. And neurodiversity now has become a hot topic. So here's what I'd like to talk about today. First of all, what is neurodiversity? And hope maybe some of you know. And why are we talking about this? And we're going to talk a little about disability, or inability, or ability, removing barriers, and then neuro versus strengths, and then what?
I don't think they match.
Lean agile.
You just need to tell me
Put yourselves on mute. Someone's talking.
which one I'm looking at.
Oh, okay. Tell
All
me
right,
again.
so hold on.
You're looking at this one.
I'm going to use my power here, so bear with me.
Are you ready for me to go give you one show?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Hey,
All right.
look at me.
Oh, there was the person, whoever CC is, so I just muted them. All right. So a lot of times people, they're not listening, so they can't hear me say mute themselves. So first of all, I am neurodiverse, so I'm on the spectrum of autism, Asperger's, and I'll talk about myself a little bit more. But all these people you see in front of you, plus millions of other people that aren't famous, are in some kind of neurodiversity spectrum, and we'll talk about what that means. So reason why we kind of put this slide here is just because you're neurodiverse doesn't mean that you can't be successful. And you'll see some people here are in their entertainment business and celebrities. And a lot of people think that if I have autism or neurodiverse or Asperger's, I'm not able to work in certain jobs that require me to be socially good and be able to work with people good, or have high, what we call emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. And we'll talk about that. That's not true is what I'm saying. That's a myth. So what is neurodiversity? So I'm going to try to play this video. Let's see if it works. If not, I can just tell you all. Can you hear? Can you hear?
All our brains.
Can you hear that?
Yes, we can hear.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play it.
But for the majority of people, their brains are similar enough that there are largely no obvious differences in how they function. They have differences in things like skills, preferences, and styles. But mostly, their brains mean they perceive the world in the same way. But for others, their brains are more fundamentally different. They have differences in things like social understanding, sensory processing, communication, and information processing. These differences are a result of neurological differences, such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and more. This natural variation in our brains is called neurodiversity. Those of us with no neurological conditions are neurotypical, and those of us with neurological conditions are neurodivergent. Neurodivergent people think differently. Their unique perspectives and experiences mean they can often excel at creativity and innovation, have highly specialized skill sets, and an ability to hyperfocus. If embraced, this can be a huge advantage to organizations and society. However, the differences neurodivergent people experience can make life challenging. In order to thrive at work, they often need some simple accommodations. For example, a sensory calm environment to recharge in, or a routine with the same start and end times. Approximately 1 in 7 people are neurodivergent. So not only is embracing neurodiversity critical for a truly inclusive organisation, but it also presents organisations with a huge opportunity.
Okay, so this is, let me ask everyone, then speak up if you feel like it. Does that help you understand what neurodiversity is? Do you understand what it is? Maybe we have some people that are on the meeting that are neurodiverse. Do you have any questions on what neurodiversity is?
This is Troy. I have a question. So is there like a specific classification? Like I heard it mentioned like ADHD and things like that. So like with neurodiversity, is there a specific like classification that we should kind of anticipate, or is it just in general, just something to be aware of just different patterns of like, human behavior?
Yeah, so good question. So neurodiversity is a medical condition, right? It's basically, and those ones that they listed, ADD, dyslexia, autism. Autism is on a scale. People are born with their brain wired differently than the so-called atypical or normal person in the world. Does that help? But I will talk more about it.
Yeah, I'm good. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a condition. It's a medical condition, and I'll tell you that we'll talk about this in a second. In my youth, in my young days, there was very little knowledge about this, and companies really didn't care about us, right? And we were treated badly. Okay. So let me talk about that. So in 1998, Judy Singer, kind of, she's a psychologist, she kind of, coined the phrase neurodiversity, and then medical science started doing more studies and I guess more attention that, hey, this is an illness, or it's not an illness in the sense that we're sick, but it can have different degrees of condition. So that's why I say it's on a continuum. So someone can be, so if I look at ADHD, do y'all know what ADHD is?
Yes.
Yeah, so ADHD is, people's brain, these, and it's a lot of hyperactivity when they're children. What's funny is they give them Ritalin because the Ritalin for children reacts differently in the neurocortex and the brain. And it basically, their brain is sped up. They think very fast, they talk very fast, they talk a lot, they crash, but it's a condition in the brain that causes people not to be able to focus a lot, pay attention a lot, and I always make fun, like, oh look, there's a new shiny object, and they go and start talking to that, and they talk a lot, and they'll change subjects as they're talking to you. Dyslexia. Does everyone know what dyslexia is? So dyslexia is where we read things or numbers or something, and we reverse them. So a lot of people have very hard time learning how to read and communicating because the brain reverses the words and the letters and the numbers. Okay, they have no control over it whatsoever. However, they can learn. We're going to talk about this. We can learn how to overcome this if it's not too severe. Tourette syndrome is my my best one. That doesn't necessarily mean that someone just says dirty words all the time and just speaks out, but they do have tics, and they do will say things or have a tic or move and everything that they have no control over. Autism is probably the focus of most people today. So autism is on a spectrum. So autism, a lot of children are born with autism, and there's early indicators, and it can be tested. And autism generally has different levels. So I have Asperger's. So Asperger, we don't use the term Asperger anymore because it was invented by a doctor. His last name was Asperger, but he was a Nazi. So we try not to use that word anymore, but still a lot of us who've been accustomed to being diagnosed with Asperger's, and there's a lot of Asperger communities out there and everything, we still use the term. But now we try to use the term autistic. And autism can be severe, where someone can't talk at all, and they have no social interactions. They're basically in a different world, okay? And they can't interface or have social contact with people. They can't be touched, and so forth. And you can look it up on Google. There's different levels or severity of autism. Asperger's is generally can also be in that continuum and have different severity. Many of us on the Asperger's continuum is what we call high functional, high level Asperger's. So we can, hold a job down, work, be successful in a career. So all those famous people I showed you before, a lot of them, some of them have ADHD, some of them have dyslexia, and a couple of them have a mild form of autism. So what's happening over the years, and I'll just let you know that, let me ask you, what do you think one of the best jobs for someone who has autism? What do you think that is? One of the best jobs? What do y'all think?
Engineering.
Yeah, engineering, software engineering especially. And that's why when you go to Silicon Valley and you start looking at some of these famous companies, you'll find that many people that work for these companies are very good engineers, hardware and software, mechanical, but many of them have some form of autism. And, that's what led me to that career 40 years ago. And I was a very good software engineer, but it allowed me to be a good software engineer back in the day before Scrum and Agile, and even during XP time. Creative software engineers, we were kind of left on our own, right? We interacted every now and then with people, but we designed and coded fantastic solutions. We all had superpowers. So if you look at any of these, especially autism, if you look at autism or any forms of autism, what we find that each one of these people have superpowers. So, there's been some famous movies of what we call savants or ideal savants, and they might not have good communication patterns, and they might not work They may not have good social or emotional EQ, but they'll have a superpower. They'll be able to do something better than the average person. And there's a lot of people like that around. So what's happened now in these days is that companies and organizations and people in general have recognized that that these people exist, I exist, and I may have some inabilities compared to others, but that's okay. I can still provide value to society and to a company, and maybe I have some needs that we'll have to talk about that we'll have to work out to make sure that I'm not hurt or harmed at the company. So, and I'll talk a little bit later about, I've been harmed and hurt many times because people basically were prejudiced and bigoted towards me. So not only do I have Asperger's, but I'm also a gay man, a proud gay man. I'm a proud autistic person, but it took me many years to be proud and to be able to speak up and be able to protect myself. So, but now many companies that have DEI, and part of their DEI is to be able to help the neurodivergent people in the organization. So why do we care about neurodiversity? Well, statistically now, since this is, has been studied a lot now, and there's a lot of research and white papers. So those that probably looked at the meetup, I put some links in there from Harvard Business Review and MIT did research, Stanford, all the great medical areas. We have neuroscience in almost all biopharm companies. We study this, right? And what we're finding out is that the neurodiverse people provide extreme value to organizations and companies and society as a whole, okay? And there's certain unique abilities that neurodiverse people have that is something that we should leverage and allow them to flourish, right? So you probably interact, all of us, with neurodiverse people every day, and you probably don't know about it. Now, remember so a lot of times we'll say, oh, that person is just very shy. Or, oh, that person doesn't have really good social skills. Or that person dresses differently. Why does that person dress? Doesn't he know those color combinations don't go together? Right? I mean, do y'all remember your high school days? Oh my gosh. I mean, if you're neurodiverse or autistic and you're in high school, you're going to get picked on a lot. Okay. Or elementary school too, right? So that's what we're talking about today. It's because, we need to treat each person and every individual in society with, respect and dignity. Okay. So the other concept here is that normal is also on a continuum. I would argue that every human being, to some degree, has some divergent normality. Okay. So this is the typical, when we look at disability or diversity, equality, and inclusion inside organizations, these are the areas we look at. Mobility, and this is the, can people move around? Are they wheelchair bound, and so forth? So they're going to have, their certain needs. Dexterity. So this is again, someone can have diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, and so forth, that inhibits their dexterity. Neurodiversity is what we're talking about today. Hearing, we know, deaf people, sight, blind people, and in age discrimination is rampant, especially, I'll tell you, in Silicon Valley. Okay. So these are things we try to focus on in companies nowadays as we try to improve the ability of people to feel a belonging to the organization and be able to be their full self, their authentic self inside the company and the teams and provide value. So this is another look at it. That's why we use the word enabled a lot, or able differently and so forth, because disabled, generally has a negative connotation. But the notion here is that we're disabled in society because there's barriers that are put up for us, right? That don't allow us to be our full open self. And we have to get rid of those barriers. That's the bottom line. So we have all these type of barriers exist, right? So when we have neurodiverse people, I'll talk a little bit about this. There's some barriers that they have. And some neurodiverse people, loud sounds bother them a lot. I mean, it hurts those people. Bright lights can hurt them and so forth. So we work inside organizations to help remove those barriers, right? Now, what do we say when we talk about Scrum and Agile, and when we look at the Agile manifesto, and we look at the values and principles, when we look at Scrum values, we talk a lot about courage, a lot about respect, and so forth. So we, the neurodiverse people in the world, we want to participate inside teams and so forth, but we want everyone to understand us. Now, some people don't feel comfortable coming out because there's a lot of stigma. If I say, okay, I have Asperger's or autism, okay, you have to have a lot of courage to come out inside your organization and your team. And there's a lot of help you can get and support. There's a lot of communities out there and support groups, as well as more and more companies are creating support groups and communities. So around 15 to 20% of the population of the world is neurodivergent. So think about that. You have a Scrum team, or if you're using SAFe, you have an ART or whatever, 15 to 20% of the people on your team can be neurodivergent, okay? And they can have any of those spectrum disorders that we talked about. So they could have dyslexia, they could have ADHD, they could have autism, okay? And you've got to be able, in my opinion, when I say you got to be able to, we have to be able to understand that and adjust accordingly, so that these people feel safe, these people, me, neurodivergent people feel safe, they feel included, they feel belonged to, and they are valued, okay? So one of the things we try to do as I work with teams and individuals is to tap into the strengths. All of us, every human being on this planet has weaknesses and strengths. None of us are perfect. So what we try to do is identify for that individual that's on the team, working with that individual, is to really understand their strengths. And you can see a list of strengths down here that neurodivergent people have. So for example, one of the superpowers I have is I can look at very complex, complicated systems and designs and architectures, and I can figure it out rather quickly. I can find problems and gaps and so forth. Same thing when I wrote code. If there's a defect and it wouldn't compile correctly, I was really quickly, I can find out what the problem is. Those that remember the old SOC 7s and everything. So I was really good. I'm really good at DevSecOps and integrating the tools and the tool chain and making sure everything works. I'm really good at Agile and Scrum and understanding how all that works and looking at what doesn't work. Okay, and over the years, I have improved my EQ, my emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, and I'm able to work with people much better now. I actually like people now, I'm a social animal. And I believe me, in my 20s, teens and 20s and 30s, I was not. Okay. So I'm saying that you can learn new skills and new abilities over time if your brain allows you. Okay. So again, we're talking about how our brain is structured, the neuroscience of our brain, which makes this neurodiversity different. It's the way we're born. Okay. All right. So I talked about pattern recognition. I'm good at that. So believe it or not, this dyslexia, where we reverse sometimes the letters and numbers, we have a hard time understanding patterns. That's really what that is. They do understand different types of pattern recognition. They're able to do lateral things. They're very good at problem solving, right? If you have some of these other tics and stuff I was talking about, they're very hyper focused, and they can really help focusing. Dyslexia is good. They're good problem solvers, right? So these are just examples of how neurodiversity. You may have issues or problems because of neurodiversity, but you also, if you are aware and work on them, you also have superpowers. So let's talk about lean agile transformation and Scrum and everything with and neurodiversity. So this is I forgot who I got this from, but this is a typical kind of, there's many different variations of how we do a lean agile transformation. It's an organized, we do change management, whether you're using ProSci, ADKAR, or any other lean change management, whatever change management approach and process you're going to apply. We generally have teams and teams of teams. And those who know Scaled Agile framework, we have arts and solution trains and so forth. But the deal here is that the idea in any lean agile transformation is to move from a project type of organization to a product or service type of organization. And it's all about the team. The team is the most powerful element in the organization, and leadership, how we lead, has changed. We move from command and control to more servant leadership, but more of coaching and mentoring. How would you think that would impact if you have a team and I come to you and I tell you that, hey, I have Asperger's, I'm on the autism spectrum? What would that tell you of how we have to interact and how the team would have to work? What do you think?
I think the best thing to do would be to ask you how you would like to work and interact.
Yeah. Individuals and interactions over process and tools, right? So we have to learn and ask the question. What would you think if you have a team, you've been doing retrospectives for the last 4 sprints, and this person never speaks up in the retrospective, doesn't have eye contact. Let's just pretend like you're either using Zoom or something, you can see people and the video's on, or you're in a room together. And if you go and push them to speak in front of people, they get really embarrassed and get very upset, and sometimes they leave. But what would that tell you?
Well, it would seem that obviously, I think someone made the point in the comments about making sure it's a psychologically safe space for people. And so forcing people to be on the video camera or to speak out, maybe have to find another way to get feedback from them. And so to me, emotional intelligence or empathy become very critical for managing or facilitating a team. to keep it high performing, because you need balance in all things. So even though you have people who may be characterized as neurodivergent, it doesn't mean that you don't glean that feedback, because you're wanting them to also be highly performing and contributing to the team. So it's balance in all things, I believe.
Yeah, so that's an important concept, because the Aristotle project at Google, psychological safety's been around for a while. The authors who created it, and then Google found out that, hey, high performing teams have a high degree or high level of psychological safety amongst their team and teammates. And they found out just because you have the best coders or the best whatever on a team, generally that team is less performing than the team that's has a mix of skills and abilities and social context, right? But what they also found out is that the team members, did not talk over each other and so forth, but they also was highly empathetic, and they built friendships and relationships with individuals on the teams, and they encouraged every member on the team to be their full authentic self, and they helped each other, right? So when we have these retrospectives or sprint reviews, and we force people to speak up and talk, or we make it a practice or a way of thinking and a way of working, that we say all people on our team, Scrum team or Kanban team or whatever, should behave a certain way. I'm one of those people, I like the idea of a mindset, but I can't really mindsets. I don't like using that term anymore. It's behaviors. I can see behaviors. I can help people change behaviors. I can't see a mindset. The result of our mindset or our way of thinking is our behavior, right? So it's very important. So I always make a joke that a Scrum Master is a part, clinical psychologist and part cultural anthropologist, right? And they have to be able to recognize, be aware, and understand individual differences in the team. And to your point, come up with ways that certain individuals on the team can participate, feel comfortable, not get harmed or hurt, and provide value to the team. So just be aware of that. There's some things in practices that we do in Scrum and Kanban and Agile in general that is actually harmful to neurodiverse people. Okay, you are causing a lack of psychological safety.
Could you share what some of those things would be? And
sure.
Also, I would be interested in you elaborating on client facing, how do you foresee roles where people have various diagnoses would be client facing, or does that depend upon their functionality in terms of where they are on the spectrum?
Yeah, it really, it depends, right? So people, so I'll just pick autism, for example. People that for their neurological brain and how that's wired, everything, some people are not as affected as others. So they can be customer facing, social. Hey, Elon Musk he's autistic. He even says it. He's been diagnosed it. Okay. He has Asperger's. Okay. So here's an example of someone that does customer face. I mean, I don't agree with everything he says and does. And he probably doesn't know what he's doing half the time. But there's an example of customer facing, society facing. And I've worked with a lot of salespeople, believe it or not, and marketing people who are on a continuum, but they don't, it's not as severe. Okay. Now, if you're on the severe side of autism, then you're probably not going to be able to work. Okay. And you're gonna have to have people helping you just to survive and live and be happy. That's the most severe side of it. I've also worked with people where we've worked very hard to overcome our inabilities. Like I said, I did with the my early years. I was not very social. I didn't understand social cues and how to work, how to deal with people and everything. So I just worked and coded and stuff. Then I worked very hard and changed and really rewired parts of my brain so that I do this. So I'm on the mild side. If you're on the severe side, you can't do that. You can't rewire your brain. It's not going to happen. Right? And there's medications too that can be taken. I think the example here is if you have someone on your team that tells you they're neurodivergent, whether it's ADHD or autism, and they're on the side of the spectrum where they function very well and they have superpowers, then we have to work with that individual to figure out how we can have them feel a sense of belonging and they can exhibit and do and perform their superpowers, right? So here's an example. So I have a retrospective. If I have someone that's autistic on the spectrum, then I would not push or ask that person to speak up. Okay, your voice is important. We want to hear you. No, I work with that individual on the side, and a lot of people with autism like the written word, right? They like to send documents. So one of the things I hear a lot from people, and I see this a lot in companies and management style. Well, from now on, Jay, don't put all that words and stuff in your emails. It's too much. I don't have time to read this and understand this and communicate with you. Shorten it. Make it, like instead of using, a paragraph, can you just use 2 sentences? What do you think that tells a neurodivergent person? What do you think that signals them? What do you think that's telling that person? You're telling that person to conform to my way. You're telling that person that, hey, you're abnormal. You're not being atypical. We want everybody in the company and the organization to conform to this way of communication. Well, wait a minute. I'm neurotypical. This is the best way. This is the way I like to communicate. This is my authentic self. What you're telling me is you don't want to take time to communicate on my level. You want me to change and communicate on your level. What's up with that? Do y'all understand what I'm saying? Is that a typical communication pattern you see in your organization?
Jay, I'll say I've seen it a lot. I came late, so I'm worried about speaking without context. But
no, go ahead.
Yeah, but no, I have always suffered. I have never been accused of brevity.
Right. And I'll tell you that if you have Asperger's, if you have ADHD, and you're in that middle spectrum and continuum, and you're towards the slight, I would say, brain disorder in a sense, this is how we like to communicate. Okay? We like words. We like narratives. We don't like talking in front of people a lot, although I've changed. I like doing that now. But, you know, and we don't like speaking up in front of our teams and people. We like communicate. We're deep thinkers. I hate to say this, except unless you're ADHD. And we like really communicate. That's our communication style, right? For management and leaders and other team members telling us that, hey, we don't like that communication style. Change your communication style to what atypical people like, because you're abnormal. That is the exact opposite of psychological safety. Do y'all understand that difference? Because you asked for an example, I'm giving you one.
My challenge has always been pursuit of exactitude. You know, perhaps the physics major comes in there.
Yeah.
But you cannot be concise. It is extremely challenging in the moment to be both concise and precise. The two are in conflict.
Exactly. They're like oxymoron concepts.
And yet I can tell you from experience, the vast majority of people don't want concise. So they don't want precise, they want concise.
Right. Exactly. And not only that, but how we promote people in our performance reviews in most companies.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the things they look at. Like, okay, this person's not concise. His communication style is X, Y, and Z, and they have to improve that. Therefore, we're not going to promote them. They're not management, capable, right?
Yeah, but we do more. We build organizational structures where all the information flow and decisions are happening up the food chain, and you end up with a situation where someone who's due to the structural elements, they only have a few moments to make that decision because the decisions have been pushed to where they shouldn't be in the first place.
So may I say something?
Yes.
Sure.
It's interesting that everyone you showed on the first slide were self-made people. And you bring up the fact that people who are, not up for promotions and things like that because they don't, I guess, fit the mold really, right? To what is acceptable political clout or behavior or whatnot.
Right.
I think those are just interesting connections I just made. That's all.
Yeah, and let me point a couple of things out to you all too, because I've been doing this for 40 something years, and I'm neurodiverse, and I've worked with a lot of neurodiverse people, and like every societal group, we're not perfect. There's bad actors and good actors in every social group in the world, right? So we're no different, right? So one of the things I did find out over my time is when I worked with teams and individuals and someone went off and coded something and did a solution, designed something and spent a lot of time, a lot of deep thinking, and then came back with I've actually experienced this. They came back with like 3 days after we've been talking about everything. They had a whole prototype designed and developed, and they were, okay, let me show you based on what we want to do. And I'm going like, holy crap. How did you do that? To their self-made person. Well, that's what they do. They go off and figure stuff out. So I've worked with lots of people. I worked at NASA, I worked at IBM and everything. And what I've noticed is that the truly innovators and creators, not 100%, but many of them were neurodiverse. And, we have this divergent, convergent, kind of thing when we work with teams, so the divergent, you go off and you think through things and come up with solutions or whatever. And then we converge and have conversations, and we get everyone's opinions and make changes. That's what we do. But what I'm finding out is that people on the spectrum that are have superpowers, when we do the divergent part, they shine above and beyond what you would expect. So keep that in mind. You have to allow that divergent, convergent type of team dynamics to happen. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, so other than being self-made, how do you do things like be a promotable person where that landscape doesn't look promising?
Jay, looks like you're talking, but you're muted.
All right. Can you hear me now? That is weird.
Yes.
So here's an example. So Zoom doesn't like neurodivergency because it automatically muted me. So anyway, I must have hit the button by mistake. I don't know how I did it. So what I was saying is that there's some concrete examples, and working with neurodivergent people, find their superpowers and the divergent and convergent way of how we do team dynamics is very important. And people on the spectrum will shine a lot when you diverge, and they have to come up with solutions and bring that to the team. And there's a whole lot of, you can Google this, there's a lot of research out there. So then the question was, well, how do we change the corporate structure, the politics, and the culture? And the way we do that is companies really, really have to be serious about diversity, equality, and inclusion. You can't just talk about it and not do anything about it. So if you work in a company and they have some kind of, HR or DEI group, and you don't see any real change happening in the company, and you don't see neurodivergent people respected, and you don't see them get promoted, then it's just all words, and they don't really mean it. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? All right, let me share my screen again.
If I could interrupt really quick,
Sure.
I actually do have a question.
Sure.
So as someone who is kind of neurodivergent, how do you recognize the moments, or how do you recognize the patterns in which it's actually a strength and not an area of development that you actually need to work on in order to achieve your leadership aspirations and things like that? Like, is there sort of like feeling or something you can go off of?
Yeah, so there's two different approaches I take. As one is listen to yourself and be aware, and I'll talk about that. The other is to reach out and belong to a community. And in my early days, I actually worked with therapists and psychologists to help me. And then later I joined communities. And there's a lot of programs you can take to become self-aware, like in the EQ, really good at doing your emotional quotient and emotional intelligence, right? So that's the first thing you got to do. The first thing is that you have to be self-aware and recognize your weaknesses and strengths. That's number one. The hardest part, I'll tell you, and it took me many years, is being courageous and being open and sharing with others at work. Okay, letting them know. Now, I'll tell you that a lot of neurodivergent people, even today, will not share because of the fear of stigma and the fear that management or the corporate politics and culture will somehow harm them, and they will not be allowed to flourish. Okay. So I would say the first thing is to be aware. Join communities. There's a lot of communities out there. So if you're ADHD, there's communities. If you're on autism or Asperger's, there's communities. If your company has a DEI group, join it. Okay. If they don't have a neurodiversity or enablement, create one and work with the executives to do that. Right. It's a journey, and every journey is individualistic. Can you all still see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So if I look at this, for example, to answer your question, it really depends upon what do you want to do when you grow up, right? So if we look at this, we have a lot of roles, right? So product owner, let me ask you all. Product owner or product manager. Can I be a product owner or product manager and be neurodiverse? What do y'all think?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. How about a Scrum Master? Can I be a Scrum Master and be neurodiverse?
Yes.
Absolutely.
You're a real Scrum Master.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Depends
Exactly.
what flavor.
Right. So can I be a vice president of, I don't know, commercial banking? Can I be neurodiverse?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think the bottom line here, there's no role, there's no function, there's nothing that you cannot do with this neurodivergent. Like I said, it's a spectrum, right? It continues. If you have very severe neurodiversity, you cannot do these things. Okay. So like I said earlier, we all started as software engineers and hardware engineers and so forth, because that was how we thought. We were very logical. Everyone kept telling us that, hey, you got to improve your emotional abilities and your social connectedness and stuff. And most of us going like, yeah, no, you do that. I'll go off over here and write code and design the best solution that's ever existed and change the world. That's what I like doing. And then over time, some of us, like me, we moved more into the social and emotional paradigm. But that's a choice. Every individual, that's a choice you make. So to your question, first, you got to be aware of your weaknesses and your strength. Then figure out, what do you want to do? Okay, I want to be a Scrum Master. I want to be the best Scrum Master in the world. Okay, here's my weaknesses. How can I improve some of these weaknesses and do a better job in servant leadership? How can I really go and ask people, how do you feel? And really listen to them and provide some hard, thought-provoking questions. I'm telling you, that's very hard for neurodiverse people to do. Does the coaching thing, do y'all, so, there's three types of Agile experience and competency. One is training, right? Which gets you like 10, maybe 15% of the way to change. Okay, that's formal training, education. The other one is mentoring. This is where I do hands-on. I show people how to do, okay, well, you never done estimating before, you don't know how to do user stories. Let me mentor you and help you till you get really good at it, right? And the last one is coaching. Coaching generally, like Lisa Atkins and others said, coaching is generally where we work one-on-one or with teams, and we are really working at the emotional level, right? And that's where a lot of neurodiverse people struggle to make that change in their career, to be able to build that competency. And luckily I did, and I was able to overcome something. Am I perfect? No, I'm still a work in progress. So here's some examples of change management, desired outcomes, and coaching clubs and coaching circles and so forth. So I wanted to bring this up because, in my opinion, to be a really good Agile coach or a change agent, You really have to understand the politics, the culture. You have to like people. You have to be on the emotional level of individuals and really understand how they're feeling and help them deal with change. Nobody likes change. No one wants to change. Does everyone agree with what I just said to be a good Agile coach or not? Speak up. No, silence means everyone agrees. And
I don't know that you have to like people to be a good coach, but you might want to be able to understand people and their motivations.
yeah, I would argue you kind of have to like them, because I'll tell you, when I started my career, I didn't like people. I thought people were my enemy. And I would avoid them at all costs. So it's important that we, as individuals, based on the life that was given to us in our brain, our neuroscience, we choose and select what best works for us and how we can flourish and be authentic. And I always say, this is me, this is Jay, I'm never satisfied with that. I always challenge myself. And I always say, Jay, you can do better. You can learn how to do that. I know this is a struggle for you and a challenge, and it's uncomfortable. But hey, I think we need to learn how to do this. Let's reach out and find out from communities or other learning programs or other people how I can grow and adapt and learn to overcome my uncomfortability. But at the same time, now that I'm older, I speak up. Like, for example, that what I talked about, when someone says, Jay, you're the media or the Teams or the chat or the email you send it's too wordy. I'm going like, well, that's not my problem. That's your problem. That's the way I communicate. If you don't respect me for my communication style, that's your problem. I'm not going to change for you. Now, that's a powerful statement. Not everyone feels comfortable doing that in a corporate structure, especially if it's a manager or a VP you're talking to. But hey, when you get, in your 60s like me, we got a lot more courage than we had in our 20s and 30s.
Jay,
So
I have some.
Yeah, sure.
I had a thought that might be relevant. I used to be absolutely horrible at reading body language. And unbeknownst to me, I was missing 70% of the conversation because I was so bad.
Right.
And not that I'm like great now. But what's interesting, and you mentioned it's behavior that you monitor, not mindset, right?
Right.
What I found interesting is I read a book or two that talked about like the mechanics of how you read the body language.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just mechanical patterns. That is to say that I leveraged my sort of introspective analytical mind to read it. And what's interesting is, at least starting off, if not still the case, I don't read it like my wife reads it. She just gets it.
Right.
I see the patterns, but whether or not, you're doing soothing behaviors or whatever, right?
Right.
But it doesn't matter whether I naturally got it or whether I analytically got it. I still got it, and it still changed the feedback loop. And the tie-in I was going there is that it is that sort of thoughtful, almost, I'm not good at the words here, you know, that quiet analytical go off and look at it thing,
Mhm.
the very thing that was to some extent part of the problem was also the solution to the problem. Is that?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I struggle with that too. When I first started learning EQ and looking at nonverbal cues and so forth, I struggled with that because, to be honest with you, I really didn't care what other people thought and felt, right? I just cared about what I was doing and my comfort zone. I didn't want to get out of my comfort zone. But again, I pushed myself to do it and learn because the reason why I wanted to learn is because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to feel like I belonged to the normals. That was my impetus, right? And then eventually I got better at it. I'm still a work in progress. But what really made me feel good was that I was able to make a difference, a positive difference.
Oh, in yourself or in how people responded, or a difference in the work that you did? I don't understand the comment.
All of them. So I made a positive difference about myself. I felt good that I learned something. I was able to overcome the challenge. Then I saw that, hey, I had ideas. I was able to get people to work together. I was able to get people to share their emotions. And I saw the result was, oh, people got along better. And it was emotional charging, but it was the result was good, right? So I started seeing, hey, by getting involved with this emotional thing and working with people and helping people, you know, get along and work better together, I felt good that I saw the outcome, the result was very positive. And I said to myself, well, you know, if I didn't do that, this team or teams of teams would not have become hyper performing. You know, again, I thought myself, that's one of those things you go through in your head where you think you're doing much grandiose, you know, input or change than you really are. But still, it made me feel good, right? Does that make sense?
I guess I have a question in terms of given that most companies have clients and are engaged with clients, how do we, I know there are teams, and of course in the Scrum Agile environment or any environment, there should be concern about how the team is performing. In the whole equation, how do we keep focus on the business value that's to be delivered to and for a client?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, you know, teams are made up of individuals and every individual has their weaknesses and strengths. So it's up to the team, I keep saying this, to figure that out and let everyone shine, right? And help people through their weaknesses and then really help people do their strengths. So I'll give you an example. In IBM, I was an associate partner and I had to work with a lot of clients. I worked with senior executives at C-level as well as others inside organizations. And what I found that, you know, I relied on my other IBMers and teammates to help me through my social challenges I had. And I would bring someone with me to the meeting with the board or the CTO or CIO, and I wouldn't go by myself, right? So the person I would go with is, you know, the exact opposite of me. They were really good on the emotional social. This is back during the day years ago. And then I was more analytical and thought-provoking and more thinking only from a strategy point of view, a tactical point of view. Because remember, one of my superpowers is to look at complexity and BS that people have and cut through it. But I struggled with how to do that in a nice way. So I got help to do that. And luckily, the culture I work with in IBM, that was just the way we worked, right? So that's what we did from a consulting business point of view. We partnered with people to help us build the solution and value that the company is looking for us to deliver, right? And then, so that's kind of what we did, and that's kind of how I kind of navigated through my journey, right? And I was lucky. I had some really great people I worked with to help me, and I helped them, of course. It's a duality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Jay, I was going to ask, so in these critical meetings in high-risk situations, in, I would assume, one of these nasty pyramidal consulting cultures, I don't know how IBM, but I know that like the BCGs and whatnot are. My initial question is, why would they want to help you in the first place? Why?
Right.
Why were your peers so useful to you? See where I'm going, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I got lucky. I don't know what it is, but I always reached out to people. So one of the things, one of my superpowers, not only to deal with the complexity of software engineering and design, I also had, I don't know what it was about me, but I had, people just trusted me. And they would share things with me like, oh my gosh, I was in meetings, and after the meeting, you know, some senior person would come up to me, or even an IBMer, and they would share things with me like, oh my God, this is really personal. I don't know if they should be telling me this, right? And I don't know what it was about me, my personality or something, where people just reached out to me to have those conversations to get personal. And it was kind of like a natural trust thing. I can't explain it. I don't know how. But what happened was we said, okay, if we work together, we'll be successful together. We'll trust each other. We can make a change, a positive change for this company. We can make a positive change for the world, right? And we just, I don't know, we just clicked. Right now, no, I'll be honest with you. I worked with some people where we didn't click. Like I could tell, I won't name of the company. I was in a meeting and a senior VP, two senior VPs were yelling at me because, you know, the project went south. And they were yelling about me about how, you know, how I screwed up and I put them in an awful situation and position about and everything. And one person was actually threatening to beat me up at the parking lot. Okay, now these are senior executives at a major Fortune 100 company. Okay, y'all. And I'm going like, and I sat there for a while, just, you know, listening. And this wasn't me. There was a couple other IBMers. And I was just listening to this. And, you know, in my mind, I was going like, what the hell? What's wrong with these people? Right? So after they went through their tirade, I calmly pointed out to them that the problem was not ours. And here's the emails I sent you. Here's why this person couldn't get the documents and the requirements done. They couldn't get the specs and design done. We tried to work with them to do that. They actually, I had two people that sabotaged, and I could prove it to them, the whole process. And I just had the conversation with them about that. But through my Asperger's and stuff, I was able to not join the emotional roller coaster that they were trying to create. And I was able to cut through it with empirical data and facts that eventually got to them, and they apologized. I said, oh, okay. They knew, you know, they're trying to play a game. Okay. And I was able to disarm the game and cut through it and be non-emotional. Right now, internally, I was an emotional wreck. Okay. I wanted to run out of the room. right? But I had people in there helping me because they were trying to deal with it better. And then I finally was able to talk and cut through it, right? So that's an example, a real life example of mine. I'll give you another real life example. So I was at IBM Large Systems Laboratory in Gettysburg. This is back when I was young, and we were doing baseline tests on different mainframe systems. We had every type of mainframe system and hardware, and we were comparing DB2 and IMS on certain applications and databases. And we were working 10 or 12 hours a day, several weeks. And I don't know if y'all remember this, we used to have tapes, and we have cartridge tapes, you had to put it into the tape reader. And I accidentally, because we were reconfiguring and we were bringing up IMS on one VM system and DB2 on another, and I put the wrong disk cartridge in the reader. Okay, and I was just pushing things, and other people were up on the system console making the changes. Well, you could just tell we were just crazy people. So I'm putting the wrong cartridge in, and all of a sudden, boom, I hear something hitting me in the back of my head. Well, my fellow person threw a disc at me and hit me in the back of the head because I put the wrong one in. Well, you know, that was one of the first time where I could not control my emotions. So I jumped over the keyboard or the center, and I started whacking him in the head. And then sure enough, here comes IBM security and pulled us off of each other. And then we had to leave. Well, we went out to the bar and had some beers, and we talked amongst each other, and we became really good friends, right? So that's another example of how, you know, I couldn't control my emotions, but at the end, the outcome was, hey, it was okay. We got along, and we worked well together going forward. So think differently. Keep written communication short and easy to understand. So this is good for AAD people. So when you look at neurodiversity, depending upon the types of neurodiversity you have, like dyslexia or AAD, I made a big whole thing about, you know, autism. We like words and writing stuff, but if you have AAD or if you're dyslexic, you want to do the opposite. You want to keep your communications short and easy, because remember, if you're dyslexic, you're flipping words and numbers around, right? Send agendas and material in advance, because certain types of neurodiversity, they have a hard time, believe it or not, I hate to say this, they have a hard time changing. They like to be on cadence and schedules and stuff. So you have to recognize that. Different ways of teams to contribute, we talked about that. Don't assume that everyone enjoys social network. I cannot underscore this a lot, because we like to have parties at work. We like to get everyone together and socially celebrate and all that. So if some people don't show up and never go to those, it's probably because they're neurodiverse and they don't feel comfortable. You know, don't look down on them. Don't treat them different. Well, when I say treat them different, don't treat them negatively. Send questions to job candidates in advance. So you were asking before, one person says, well, how do you know if you're neurodiverse? How do you advance people in the company? How do you interview people and candidates? So there's a whole, you can look it up on Google. There's a whole way that we interview people and determine if they're neurodiverse. And don't judge people because they're not fitting your social norms. Leader and member techniques. If someone's struggling with a task you believe it may be related to neurodiversity, have an open conversation. We talked about that. Now, don't be alarmed if they don't feel like sharing and they feel scared. Okay? That's okay. Just let them come out on their own and help them. Give them an environment that they feel comfortable. Share. So once people become comfortable and they feel a sense of belonging, they feel they can be authentic and they can share their condition and needs. Overcoming social interactions, fears, and challenges. Stress is a big thing. A lot of neurodiverse people, because of the way our brain is wired, we create more stress for ourselves than we should. Just be aware of that. The emotional challenge, we talked about that. DAI programs, very important. Calming and mindfulness techniques. I had to learn to do this. I do this all the time now. Things get to me more than the average normal person that is not neurotypical. Little things bother me. When I talk about it to my normal friends, they go, "Why? What the hell's wrong with you? Why would you let that bother you?" Hey, that's why my brain's wired differently, okay? So I have to go through a lot of calming and mindfulness techniques for me to get through the day. So a lot of times, at work, I do training, I do education, I do workshops, I work with people a lot. I can only do that like 2 or 3 days in a row. Then I need to take a break for 2 days, or I'm going to implode. I'll tell you that. And I let everybody know that, right? And it's not just recharging. I have to center myself again and prepare myself to be socially equipped to go forward. And then last but not least, I'll send this out to everyone. Here are some techniques or resources you can go to learn more. There's a lot of stuff out there now. Like 30 years ago, there was nothing out there, nothing out there in the world to help us. But now there's like tons and tons of stuff, more stuff. So that's it. So now I will stop sharing and ask if there's any questions. What do you want to talk about before we end our evening?
This is Marva, and I first of all just want to commend you for your vulnerability and for the successes that you've had in your career. It seems that lots of companies, as you stated before, have begun to embrace the notion of bringing in people that have various diagnoses of neurodiversity. EY is doing it, data analytics, and so, but also in the financial segment, companies like JP Morgan. So actually Microsoft is doing it. Bill Gates himself is neurodivergent. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really sure how they are getting around maybe some of the HIPAA and potential liability that they may incur. So it seems to me that there are a lot of things to consider. Like for me, even my concern would be whether or not people that are diagnosed as neurodivergent, are they experiencing equity in the true sense of equity, or from a wage standpoint, or even from a position standpoint, as you were alluding to before, on your ability for upward mobility or movement. So clearly there would be concerns about that. And I know that there are roles that some are client facing and some are not client facing that are available. And then I guess to the credit, there was a young man that he's in one of the videos for EY, and I believe his dad worked with the company. At any rate, he developed an application that is currently being licensed by NASA. And so those differences in brain patterns or thinking, and even in eye movement, which also obviously would be connected with your brain function, that those are being seen as value adds to companies to enhance their profitability or their business model. So again, I want to commend you for your successes and your vulnerability and transparency. I appreciate that very much, and for helping me to better understand.
Yeah, and thank you very much, because I'll just say this, as a Black female, you probably experience this all the time. Some of these things that I talked about and your journey, right?
That's correct. Some of the concerns. So again, I I do think it requires mindfulness, if you will, on everyone's part, and to assure that companies are not seeking after profits to the harm of individuals, because that certainly would not be good, fair, or equitable.
Yeah, but
in
why
the
wouldn't
long
they?
run.
They always have.
Yeah.
I mean, all their structural incentives.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the thing. So look, if you work for a profit-making company and everything, you know, their financial goals and interests are going to trump everything. Now, how they treat people to obtain their financial goals, how they include neurodivergent people to help them reach their financial goals and treat everyone well, that's what we're talking about, right? Do you give me the ability to do whatever I want to do, master my domain, do my superpower, but it's going to help you build your revenue and increase your market and change the world, right? But you got to allow me to be myself to do that. If not, I'm going to go somewhere else. And I love the millennials because you can tell I'm in a generation, a few generations before millennials and the new generation. Man, when I work with the millennials, they don't take crap. They'll just go to another company. If this company is not socially responsible and they don't treat their people well, yeah, they'll go somewhere else.
Is that because of generation, or are they just not young and they're just not old enough to have kids and house and mortgage and blah, blah? So yeah. I'm not convinced that it's because they're younger. I'm sorry, I'm not convinced it's because it's a new generation. I think they're just like, yeah, I think you could find that 30 years ago in the young people, right?
Yeah. So I think every generation brings a new reality and new paradigm shifts. I grew up in the 60s. Okay. And we were trying to make a huge paradigm shift. And I was in San Francisco Bay Area in the 60s. So just
okay. I was going to say which 60s. Yeah. So
yeah. So and my father was in the military. He was in the Air Force and he was in Vietnam.
Yeah, that's a different 60s.
So it was a huge, my generation was in conflict with the generation that was running the world, right? And we were trying to make change, right? Whether we did or not, that's for debate, right? But I did notice that I'm working with a younger generation today compared to how I think in my generation. I noticed differences in their behavior, differences in their outlook and their thinking, and dependencies too. Like they're dependent much more on tech now, right? And so I do notice some differences, and I think we see that in every generation, right? There's some differences, and some of it's good and fun, and some of them probably not. So I have noticed that, but one thing I did notice about the younger generation, and probably because they don't have a mortgage and 5 kids, that they'll up and leave, right, to find the best place for them and settle down. Now I don't see people settling down as much anymore. Remember, we used to work for a company, we'd be there for 20, 30 years, right, and retire. You don't see that too much anymore.
Well, it's not safe.
Yeah.
Used to, there was this implicit social contract. That's gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Elon Musk just fired 50% of the company. So you never know what's going to happen, right? And you got to protect yourself and protect your family. Cool. Any other comments? Go ahead.
Yeah. This is Colin. I just wanted to address a little bit of what Marva said. And first I'll tear down Microsoft and then I'll give them an endorsement. One of the challenges, I worked 9 years at Microsoft, and ultimately my neurodiversity cost me my career there. Mostly because I got reorged 6 times in 9 years. but I got reorged out of program management into a software engineering role. And that's not an area that I could thrive and build a skill set on. And also, by the way, joining Microsoft with 0 days of development isn't the best career path. You know, as far as there's people 6 months ahead of me at the city college down the road. But I wanted to say, you know, one of the problems with DEI right now is commitment is verbal, but not very deep. The proof of the pudding there is if you've paid attention to the layoffs in the last few months, 8 out of the 10 big tech companies had massive DEI. All the recruiters got laid off. A lot of the program drivers got laid off at Twitter. Even before Elon Musk, they had torn down their accessibility team to 0. So the commitment isn't very deep. And in my company, I'm pushing them heavily to don't say DEI, it's DEI and A. We have to include accessibility. Or make sure verbally you're saying inclusivity includes people who are have accessibility needs. I think it's easier to keep it separate, but I get the DEI is easy to say and it's easy to replicate in the industry. So, you know, I found the last thing I'll say about the teardown of Microsoft, why it cost me my career was not only was I not really capable as a software engineer, but DEI at the corporate level, at the senior leadership level is much different than the middle manager level. And so it may take generations before even a company as forward thinking as Microsoft is going to be able to really do more than have somebody take an hour-long, you know, class that's required at the start of the year by HR and really ingest that and make it theirs. Now, I've said a lot of negative about Microsoft. Of the companies that did all those layoffs, Microsoft wasn't one of them. And I'll also point out, and this is something you should share with your neurodiverse friends, is they have a neurodiversity hiring program at Microsoft. I believe on LinkedIn, it's called Neurodiversity at Microsoft. It doesn't have the word hiring. But if you go in there, there's a jobs train, basically a way for you to get on and get into a program that's designed to help people with neurodiverse challenges. And the only problem I'll say with that is right now they have kind of a path for a very narrow amount of roles, probably more in software engineering. Then I always ask them, what about HR? Isn't there anybody that needs an HR job? And I don't mean hiring, and I don't mean recruiting. I mean, what are the back office jobs? What are the other jobs around the company, like program management and leadership, that also have a channel for people who need extra time, need accommodations to make it through the type of interviews that big tech have. So don't give up. And even though, you know, I had challenges there, it was the best time of my life, and it primed my career for the rest of my life. So I embrace them, even with some asterisks next to them of like, tread cautiously, but also push your companies to do more than just verbally commit. Notice what kind of training they're giving and see if they're standing behind it, or is it just a checkbox DEI?
Yeah, that's a thank you very much. That's a good point, because you know, organizations have behaviors, right? So when someone says, hey, we have DEI, we're going to do this, and I'm going like, really? Show me what you're doing. Okay, tell me how certain people are being advanced in your organization and what roles they play. So lately we've been focusing a lot, which we should, on the glass ceiling. We should be focusing a lot on minorities, but they're getting senior level positions in companies on the board, as well as executives and leaders in the organization, right? Now I'll tell you, the Silicon Valley companies, Microsoft is one of them, in the early days were abysmal. They were abysmal about giving diversity its due. So if I look at most companies, you know, it wasn't too long ago, if I look at Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and Apple, it was a bunch of white guys. And not only that, but as people, which is funny because a lot of those leaders never graduated college, they were hired from, you know, Ivy League, so people would hire people that look like them. and came from the same social economic background, right? And it took organizations and people, nonprofits and other groups pointing that out to society and making it news before they changed. They were forced to change. I don't think they would have changed otherwise, to your point. I don't think Microsoft would change if they weren't forced to. And I think the new generations are forcing that as well. All right. 9:51 p.m. Eastern. I want to be, cognizant of everyone's time. So I want to thank everyone for joining. I'll upload this to our recording to the YouTube. If you belong to the meetup, everyone has access to my email. You can just reach out to me if you want to have any more communication and talk about this stuff. I'm available. So thank you all very much. And I'm going to close our session for today. And I'm going to make a cocktail and watch a movie. Thank you all. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Right.